Hey, when are you gonna get those fishing poles looked at? We're comfortable waiting for that, and there's no rush. And going for the media.
We will get started since all of you are on time, which is great. I definitely see a handful of people I don't recognize, which is awesome. So my name is Melissa, and I'm the volunteer coordinator here. I also help organize some of the public events like these lectures. And we love having these in the winter because it's a good way to keep people kind of involved in getting out of the house, even if it is cold or snowy, and you get to learn something new. So if you haven't been here before, this is the headquarters of the Great Bay National Estuary Research Reserve, and we are part of a national system. So there's 30 reserves around the country. The closest one to us is in Wells. Probably a lot of you have been there. They have an extensive trail system, which is beautiful. And every reserve gets part of their funding from the federal government and then part of their funding from a more local partner. So for us, it's New Hampshire Fish and Game. So all of our properties are New Hampshire Fish and Game, which means they're open to the public. They're free to access to get outside and connect with nature. And at this location, we have education programs. We do field research, land protection around Great Bay, and then also we have a coastal training program, which helps educate local decision makers. And so this is our second lecture of the winter. I don't know if anyone was able to come to the January lecture, but we'll have another one in March as well. And we record them and put them on our YouTube channel. So if you missed the January one, you can see it there. And so today, I'm personally very excited for this topic, but the theme this year is sort of what's happening with. So in February, it's what's happening with marine mammals. So we have Lauren McDowell here from Seacoast Science Center Marine Mammal Rescue. And she's been with them for a couple of years. She has a great background, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what's happening with the marine mammals in the Seacoast area. I'm hand it over.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm really excited to be here today because we get to talk about my favorite topic, which is marine mammals. So today I'll be talking about the program a little bit about what we've been responding to, and then a couple of case studies if you guys are interested in that. First, a little intro. This is me. I'm the manager of the Marine Mammal Rescue Program at the Seacoast Science Center. Has anybody heard of the Marine Mammal Rescue Program before? Oh, awesome. Okay. So you guys know what's up. You guys know what we do. I'll explain a little bit of background just for people that haven't heard of it before. But I'll try to go through it pretty quickly because it sounds like we all know what's happening. I was formerly an intern, and then I also was the community outreach manager as well. So I've been with the program for a decent amount of time, but it's been really fun kind of seeing all the changes, and every month is very different. Every day is very different. So it's really fun kind of being a part of this program and kind of learning more about marine mammals. I also went to the University of New Hampshire. So I kind of grew up around here, did a lot of different experiences, kind of being outside at UNH. But then now I get to kind of see the other side of that with different responses and things like that. So this is where we're located. If you haven't heard of the Seacoast Science Center before, you should definitely go. It's a great nonprofit. They have great aquariums, great hiking trails. It's in a state park as well. So if you head down to Rye, New Hampshire, we're based in Odiorn Point State Park. We are also based there. So Marine Mammal Rescue, we are a small section of the Seacoast Science Center. Only a couple person team, but lots of volunteers. So we are based there, but then we respond all throughout our territory. So this is our vast territory. It's a general territory because we do respond in kind of the Great Bay and also different estuary systems. Seals do head up in that area if they're following food or if they're ice seals and they're just kind of looking for a place to rest. So we respond to the whole state of New Hampshire, anything that's popping up around there. And then we also respond to the 3 Isles of Shoals. So there's a couple of Isle shoals across 13 miles off the coast. Some are Maine and then some are New Hampshire. So we respond to the 3 that are a part of New Hampshire. And then we just expanded our territory. So we've been responding to northern Massachusetts since 2018. But then recently, last year, we responded all the way down to Beverly, Massachusetts. So that is with our agreement with NOAA. We expanded all the way down there. And as you can see, this kind of territory sticks out a little bit. Just like if you've heard of like Cape Cod and how that sticks out, there's a lot of strandings out there. So same with this one, definitely causes a lot of very interesting cases that we get. And it's definitely one of the most areas that we respond to more commonly. So our goals as a program, number one, it's to protect the health and safety of both humans and animals. Obviously, when we're out responding to animals, we're making sure our volunteers are being safe, but also the public, because these seals will rest along the coastline for like 25 to 60% of their life. So they're totally fine being on the coast, but there can be things like dogs and animals getting too close, and there can be a transfer of zoonotic diseases. So for us, we're making sure that nobody's getting injured or bit or kind of disturbing both the seals and humans. It's also to educate the public. That's my favorite part, I think, because sometimes we're the first people that are there with an experience with a seal. So I get to be that person that kind of shows them that experience, and hopefully it's a positive one, where they kind of fall in love, just like I have, with seals or marine mammals. Third, it's to lessen the pain and suffering of animals. So we work with a vet to try to make decisions on whether we should either euthanize an animal, bring it to rehab, or maybe just monitor and let it rest. There's a lot of different options when it comes to marine mammal rescue. So every case is very different, and we really have to communicate a lot for different scenarios. And then finally, it's to collect scientific data under our legal permit with NOAA Fisheries. So you might have heard of the Marine Mammal Protection Act of 1972. This piece of legislation is how we are able to function. So animals, marine mammals 50 years ago were almost extirpated from the area. They were almost completely gone. A lot of people that I talk to when they're on the beaches, they'll talk about how they've never seen a seal before in this area. And that's because they really weren't. Not only was whaling happening, but people were actually putting bounties on seals for a way to kind of kill them off as a way to increase the fishery populations, which we now realize that that does not help the population. We were actually hurting the fishery population. So for us, they created the Marine Mammal Protection Act. They actually prevented the take or harassment, hunting, or capture or killing of any marine mammal. So that's all within the United States. And this piece of legislation has been used across the world to kind of help with different pieces of conservation. There's been different types of countries that have used this as an example for them because of how successful this act is. So we're seeing seals now because of this act, and we're able to function because of this act as well. So all of our permitting mandates us to be able to collect data and monitor these animals while also then reporting it to NOAA Fisheries. And then what are we responsible for? So we've got a lot of different kind of roles within marine mammal rescue. First off is we have a 24-hour hotline. Our hotline's there, so you can save that if you're on the beaches a lot, but they're also on our stickers and those magnets over there. So if you want to grab those at the end, definitely recommend. And then we're also the first response. This photo is a great example of kind of what we see, especially in the summertime when it gets really busy. People are all on the beaches and a seal pops up. People are really excited, which we are too, but sometimes they get a little too excited. They want to push it back in the water and maybe aren't educated about the topic as much. So our job is to sometimes just set a boundary and make sure we're educating the public about maybe the seal just needs to rest for a little bit and then it'll hop back in the water, but harassing it and taking selfies isn't going to help the situation. So we also, as I said, collect data on this. So we're monitoring the animal, and then we also get deceased seals. So isn't as glamorous as cute seal pups, but the deceased seals we're able to collect, swab samples. We're able to collect data on body morphometrics, which is really interesting, and just kind of learn more about the population as a whole. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the next slides. So then who do we collaborate with? As I said, we're a small nonprofit, so we can't do it all. So we collaborate with a lot of different organizations to make sure that we are doing right by the animals. One of those is rehabilitation. So that is an option for seals, not so much for dolphins. But rehabilitation is honestly one of our great options for seals if it's a situation where that would help them. That photo at the top is us at a release day, which I will talk about in a future case study. But those are one of our best days because you're just able to see kind of the hard work of both organizations trying to make sure that this animal can be released back out into the wild. And that's always our goal with marine mammal rescue, is making sure we can release them back. We also collaborate with pathology labs. So we do swab samples on every deceased animal and then also all of the live animals as well. And then we'll collaborate with Tufts Veterinary Medicine. So we'll send those swab samples down and they do a lot of analysis on wildlife zoonotic diseases. So they're actually studying to see how zoonotic diseases are being transferred between humans and then also animals. We also do necropsies or animal autopsies. So that photo at the bottom is of an animal autopsy or necropsy. That is a dolphin, so we're able to figure out why the animal might have died, which is really valuable to us, especially if it's a scenario where, outside external factors aren't pointing to why it might have died. So sometimes we'll have an injured seal that obviously has a very severe shark predation. We usually are able to know how it died, but if we aren't, we're able to use kind of the necropsy as a way to kind of tell why it might have passed. We also collaborate with the disposal of the animals. So I talked about zoonotic diseases. We work with DPW in the state to kind of help with those kind of disposal of those large animals, which helps hopefully the public from transferring any of those diseases and looks a little bit better when there's not a decaying seal on the beach or whale. So for us, we're able to collaborate with that as well. And then I mentioned other stranding organizations. So these are our network partners. We have a lot of different partners all across the United States. So on both coasts, we have stranding network partners that are responding, essentially doing the same thing as us, but in their respective territories. So we communicate all of our data to NOAA, and then they combine all of that data from Massachusetts, from Maine, and then they kind of compile all of it to better understand where these animals might be moving. For example, right now we're monitoring harp seals. They're an Arctic seal species that I'll talk about in the next couple of slides, and they actually are kind of in our area. So they've been kind of tracking where groups of them have been kind of moving around. So those are all great kind of hotline numbers if you guys are from a different area. But the big one is definitely the NOAA fisheries one, because that actually goes to any of the locations. You're just able to type in that location. So those are our network partners. Does anybody have any questions about kind of our program at all before I get into some of the species that we see? No? Well, that's a good thing. Means I'm doing okay. So we've got some seals. Obviously, we respond to all different types of marine mammals. So this includes whales, dolphins, porpoises, and then seals. 90% of our cases are seals. So most of these are the seals that we're seeing. We respond to only phocids or true seals. That is a family class that we use to kind of justify these types of seals and differentiate them from sea lions or fur seals. So these are completely different than the sea lions that you might see on the California coast. Sea lions actually have a flexible hip girdle that can go under their bellies, and they're actually able to gallop along the coast. These guys aren't able to do that. As you can see, a harbor seal has a fixed hip girdle. So they do this thing called galumping, or they do a caterpillar motion while they're kind of on the coastline. If you've seen any of them kind of galump, it's a very interesting sight to see. So they're not very agile on land, but they're very agile in the water, very quick moving. They also don't have any external ear holes. So you can see that little hole in the side of their head. That is their ear, but there's no little ear flaps like the sea lions have. So they're very different. They also don't bark like seals, which you might also think of. So these are our special seals that we get here, or phocids. And they're called true seals mostly because they're more adapted for the ocean than they are for land. So these two seals right here, harbor seals and gray seals, those are two seals that we have all year round. So you might not see them in the summertime just because it gets really busy, and they'll move more offshore than staying close to the coastline. And that's just because it gets busy. They like to be on their own. They like it when it's quiet. So these guys are here all year round. And then hooded and harp, the one that I mentioned, that is an Arctic seal species. Both of these come down from the Arctic, and they'll actually stay here in the wintertime. So I'll get more in depth with harbor seals and gray seals, but hooded seals and harp seals will usually see the juveniles that will come down. So it's usually mating season up in the Arctic, and that's not their time yet. So they'll come down and find food, kind of stay with us, and they'll usually just kind of end up kind of relaxing on the coast. Hooded seals are really cool. This is their juvenile form, or bluebacks as we call it, because they've got that nice blue strip on their back. They look like pugs, I feel like, if you're comparing dogs to seals. They have very massive eyes, which this guy's closing his eyes in this photo. But their counterparts, their adult counterparts, the males actually are the ones that have the red membrane that can extend from their right nostril and they can inflate it. So if you've seen that on National Geographics, this is what they look like when they're younger. Hooded seals are also really cool because they have the shortest lactation period of any marine mammal. Does anybody want to guess how long they're with mom? You can just shout it out too. 1, 2 months, okay. 3 weeks, okay. We were going lower, but 24 hours, good guess. It's 3 days. So they're with mom for 3 days. Their mom's milk is 50% fat, so I like to call it like their own seal protein powder. They're getting really big really quickly, getting all that blubber, and then they're on their own for the rest of their life. So sometimes we'll see some of these fallouts, the juveniles, usually a couple months in, and they'll come down kind of following food. Harp seals are also very cool. These are the juveniles as well. So they've got that beater like pattern on their kind of body. When they're older, they actually have 2 spots, 2 dark spots. So one, when they're adults, one of the spots covers their whole face. And then the other spot covers their back and it's shaped like a harp, which is how they got their harp name. So these harp seals are also really cool because when they're juveniles, these spots actually help us ID them in the field. So we actually had a seal on Valentine's Day a couple years ago that had a heart-shaped spot right on its chest, which was very convenient and cute for us because we were able to distinguish it from another harp seal that we were monitoring in the field. So they're really cool as well, but they also won't usually stay around here for too long. They're just kind of paying a visit as they're kind of moving through. So those are the 2 Arctic species. Then we'll get into gray seals. So when you're looking at both of these seal species, a lot of people think, okay, gray seals are going to be darker because they're named gray seals. They actually are very similar pelage. So if you're trying to tell the difference based on color, you're not going to be too successful. Definitely looking at their face shape is how you can tell the difference. So gray seals, this is a rookery that's out on Monomoy that I took a photo of. So this guy is definitely a female. The males are sexually dimorphic. So the males are a lot larger and their noses are massive. But you can see that both of them kind of have this horse head face shape. So I always ask my friends, I'm like, if you see a seal, does it look like a horse or does it look like a puppy dog? And usually if they tell me it looks like a horse, I'm like, okay, it's probably a gray seal. They also have a W-shaped nose, so you can kind of see it there. Their 2 nostrils are kind of separated to look like a W. And they're also aggressive upon approach. So every seal, if you're messing with it, is going to be aggressive, obviously. But these guys will actually lunge at you even a couple days old. So it's just kind of in their nature. So these are the adults. And then pupping season actually is here. So they're actually born in December, and then we kind of get the fallout usually at the end of January and then into March. But these are some pups just showing the differences in the like kind of the pelage that you get with these different types of seals, and that's all genetics. So you don't really know what you're gonna get, just like our hair color. But they are kind of usually with mom for about 3 to 4 weeks, which is still fairly short. But again, they're gaining weight, they're getting all that blubber, so then they can swim in the ocean. When they are with mom, they're just kind of sitting on the coast with mom, just feeding on her milk, and that's it. They've got this nice lanugo fur that you can kind of see this guy has and still shedding or molting. So this little lanugo coat is actually thicker than their adult fur. So it's thicker because they're just sitting along the coast and they got to stay warm. And they also don't have that blubber to keep them warm. So it needs to be extra warm for them. But then once they're weaned, they'll shed that and then they'll have their adult coat. So that's gray seal pupping season. Then we'll move into harbor seal pupping season. So they, as I said, they look similar to a dog. They've got that shorter snout, and then they also have a heart-shaped nose or a V-shaped nose. And they also have a dark strip between their eyes. And this just shows again, so this is a haul out actually on Salisbury Beach State Reservation. It's a great location if you want to look at healthy seals. And we also do seal walks there if you guys are interested. I could talk about that at the end. But they will all usually rest here as a way to just kind of thermoregulate, as a way to kind of, after they're really, overheating from different types of swimming and chasing things and being chased after. So they'll just kind of rest here away from predators and kind of cool off. So that's harbor seals. And pupping season for them is actually in the summertime. So that obviously coincides with like the busy season of everyone being on the beach, which is why it's our busy season. We also will mostly respond to harbor seals. So gray seals are a little less common around here. They're very common around the Cape, but we'll talk a little bit more about like kind of the trends we're seeing with that. Their lactation period is 3 to 4 weeks as well. And they're usually they've been having pups a little bit earlier, so it's been usually around April now, and that's just changes that we're seeing in climate change and things like that. But definitely making it for an interesting kind of response when there's a lot of people on the beaches and there's just these pups that don't really know that maybe we can be a threat. Same with dogs and things like that. So usually we're getting pretty busy. We have a lot of interns in the summer that kind of help us out with responses and things like that. So those are kind of harbor seals and all the other seal species. Does anybody have any questions about those before I get into some stats? Yeah.
Typically, how many pups do they have at a time?
Only one. Yep.
Only one.
Only one. Yep. So that's it. For them, they're mammals just like us. So it's a little bit, they're putting all their energy into that one pup. And then that's it. Yeah. Good question. So these are some of the stats that we get into. So we started our program in 2014. Previously, this was managed by the New England Aquarium. They managed this territory all the way up to the Maine-New Hampshire border. But recently, or in 2014, they actually were able to just move to turtles. So they just wanted to focus on that. And we took over this territory. So you can see kind of a trend. We're usually around the same average type of animals. We haven't seen a huge increase with the number of responses with our expansion. So we're normally around 115 animals per year. Recently, we've been getting around 110, but you can see in 2018, there's that huge spike of responses. And that was due to phocine distemper virus, which is very similar to the distemper virus that you might vaccinate your dogs for. It's actually just a mutation that mutated into the seals. And ended up killing off a lot of that population. So this kind of comes with, the time of like averaging out the carrying capacity of those populations. They are obviously very close quarters when they're on those haulouts, so it spreads fairly quickly and things like that can happen. Just like us with COVID, things spread really quickly, and unfortunately there were some people or adaptations that were adapted to survive this. So we were responding to a lot of those seals in 2018. There was still some fallout in 2019, and then we were able to kind of balance back out. And we haven't seen as much harbor seals since then, but you'll see in the future kind of stats, we've definitely averaged out with other types of species. So those are kind of the breakdown. This is a little bit more thorough. So pretty much the same graph, but you can see the breakdown of each type of species. So these are kind of the acronyms for the scientific names for each type of species that we respond to. The blue PV, Phoca vitulina, is harbor seals. The orange is gray seals, and then the gray is harp seals. And then you'll see there's kind of a breakdown of different types of cetaceans that we respond to. That kind of changes. You'll see that we respond to a lot of harbor porpoise as well. And usually consistently we're getting unknown pinnipeds where we can't differentiate the different types of seals. And that's just due to decomposition, which happens. So definitely changes over time. You can see, and we'll talk about it, that there's a huge kind of lighter orange box, and that was lags, or as we call them, Atlantic white-sided dolphins. So we saw a huge spike in those cases the last 2 years, and we'll kind of get into why that might be. These are also our cetacean responses. So cetaceans are a general term that we use that classify whales, dolphins, and porpoises. So anything but seals for us. So we've been seeing, obviously, since we started our program, we get about 10 to 15 animals per year for just cetaceans. And that could be a massive whale that takes us 2 weeks to cover, or it could be a harbor porpoise that, we resolve in like a couple of hours. So it really varies, even though they might say just 10. It definitely depends on the case of what we're kind of putting into that case. And then you'll see 2024 again and 2025 spiked in cases. We almost doubled the number of cetaceans that we were responding to in the last 2 years. So then getting into that, why was that? In 2025, we responded to 22 Atlantic white-sided dolphins. So this is an Atlantic white-sided dolphin here. They are a pretty cool animal. So we have two dolphins that we most commonly see, common dolphins and then Atlantic white-sided dolphins. So these were most of our cases in 2025. And the reason why this was a couple of different reasons. So all of these cases that we responded to were usually strandings that ended in either euthanasia or the animal had already passed away. So situations where we can't do rehab because it's either too far gone or the animal is just too thin and rehab is not an option for these dolphins. We saw a similar kind of trend of all of these dolphins having being juveniles, so smaller dolphins. You can see in that photo in the bottom, that dolphin is not much longer than I am. So it's about 4 to 5 feet, but they can get up to 7 feet or 8 feet. So definitely juveniles that we were responding to and very thin dolphins. For us, we were not equipped for this, obviously, with all of the scenarios that we've done historically. 22 dolphins is something that we did not consistently respond to. So for us, with these dolphins, we did swab samples on all of them. We were able to do necropsies on a lot of them. And then we also did testing for brain and spinal cord. And then we also did lung swabs as well. So trying to understand what types of illnesses might be killing these dolphins. So we tested for morbillivirus, influenza A, and then also brucella, which are all very common illnesses that we see in cetaceans. And all of them were negative for all of these dolphins. So you're like, why are we seeing all of these trends? Experts currently believe that these trends might be a shift in food availability. So since these dolphins are really thin, we knew that it wasn't fully an illness. They were not able to find food with enough time to grow and be successful in their environment. We also noticed that a lot of these dolphins had green algae all over them when we responded to them, and that's usually a result of them being in a shallow environment for a long period of time. So with these cold surges or this food availability, that was a result of cold surges that were happening in the Gulf of Maine. So we know that the Gulf of Maine is rising in temperature dramatically compared to the rest of the world. And these animals are very intelligent. They're mammals like us, so they stay at the same temperature and they adapt to those environments. So they were able to adapt to this warm temperature. And then all of a sudden, these cold surges from the Labrador Current and then also from freshwater intakes were kind of flushing into the system and shocking their system. So as a result, they moved more inland. They're moving towards food, trying to find, warmer waters, and they are at risk of stranding. So these situations, obviously, very incredibly sad, but also show us the impact that is being had on these animals. And we wouldn't have known that if we didn't do kind of research on these strandings. So that's kind of the cetacean side of it. Does anybody have any questions on that? That was a lot. So these are kind of the cold surges that are happening with the Labrador Current. So you can see, obviously, that's us right there. And then that's the Cape. The IFAW did a lot of really good studies as well because they saw a huge uptick in their cetacean strandings as well. We actually assisted with a lot of their strandings because they had upwards of 120 dolphins at one time. And that is a really good article that they published, and I'm happy to queue it up to anybody if they're interested. Just feel free to email me. So that's kind of the cetacean scenario that we are seeing currently. Right now, we have not responded to any dolphins this year, but who knows? We started responding to them like in early March. So we'll see what this year brings for us. But yeah, any questions about that? No? Yeah.
This pepper in 2018.
Yeah.
Did they catch it from a dog, or you don't know?
I do not know. It's very likely. So we see dog bites all the time on seals. They interact more consistently than I think we even know. I don't know if they know the origin of the phocine distemper virus, but it's a mutation of the canine distemper virus. I know that. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't.
I was asked this before. I have no idea. Maybe because they adapted that way. So harbor seals and gray seals live in the same territory. It might be just like competition. So for them, they might have adapted to feeling like they could have more territory in the wintertime. And they do because we're not out a lot, and the harbor seals are also not out. So they don't need those areas to give birth. Because they need like a vast area to be able to stay with those pups for those 3 to 4 weeks and not be disturbed. But great question. Yeah. Gray seals, sharks, of course. For them, also like illnesses, zoonotic diseases, usually kind of spread really quickly, like avian bird flu as well. That's mostly the predators and then us.
That time of year.
Yeah, maybe that too. I mean, there are not a lot of sharks that are in that area. So that also is an adaptation too. There's always a reason. I just don't know the reason. Haven't asked them yet. So then getting into harbor seals and gray seals, these are kind of the trends that we have seen over time since 2014. So number of responses that we've done, obviously there's a huge spike in the harbor seals. Blue is harbor, red is gray. Sorry, I keep moving it into my way. And then gray seals are the red. So obviously in the beginning we had like no gray seal responses, but more recently they've been leveling out. So as you can see, after this huge spike of harbor seal, phocine distempervirus, they ended up kind of declining after that. And we've actually been seeing their population has been leveling off and if not declining. We don't fully understand the population of both of these seals, just because there's so many. But harbor seals, their population is hitting a carrying capacity to the point where they are at their carrying capacity, and that's kind of it. Yes.
What percentage are going back in the water and what percentage are?
That's a great question. For us, it's 50-50 for live or deceased animals. And then maybe 15% of those are getting rehabbed back out into the wild. So not too much of this percentage. But for this, you were seeing a lot more of those responses with gray seals. And gray seals have actually been a successor of climate change. So they've actually been successful with the results of climate change. So warmer waters for them have made them more successful in the Cape, which you might have heard about how their population is booming right now. And they are increasing, and we're seeing a result of that in New Hampshire. So now we're kind of leveled off. We're at the same kind of level for both gray seals and harbor seals, which has been definitely interesting and kind of a shift, especially with my boss who has been working since 2014. She's kind of seen the shift of this as she's been working over time. So that's kind of the trends that we're seeing there. I also love to mention, so in 2018, I mentioned the phocine distempervirus. That was part of a UME, so the unusual mortality event. NOAA Fisheries is able to declare this event to make sure that we get extra funding and resources during that time to investigate why these animals might have been dying. So in the beginning, we didn't know fully why these animals were passing away, but we were able to, with that funding, to kind of investigate. And you might have heard of like the North Atlantic right whale. That whale is incredibly endangered, and they're currently in a UME because they're investigating kind of the number of different things that are hurting that population. So those are the different types of seals that we're seeing over time. Then I feel like a good question that a lot of people ask is, where do we respond to most? So obviously larger beaches, we're responding to more often. Rye is where we're based, so a lot of people just know our hotline and they're able to call it in. And then we also respond a lot in Ipswich, Massachusetts. So if anybody's been to Crane Beach, it's a very long beach. We also have a really good relationship with the parks there, so they call in anytime they see a seal. This was just in 2024, so obviously it does change. We also have a lot of responses in Hampton because that beach is also very long and a lot of people know us there. But it just kind of depends on if people are on the beaches, able to report it, and if they know the hotline number. Yeah.
You also cover Parker.
Yep, we also cover Parker River. That isn't separate. That's included in Newburyport and Newbury, which is why those are probably a little bit higher. But yeah, it's a great question. Yeah. Oh, really? That's far up there.
Yeah, docks from the
Exeter Academy.
Oh, really? Oh, yes, I read about that case. Yeah, pretty interesting.
Flying back in the water.
He went back in the water. I just read that case recently and he jumped back in the water and wasn't cited. So I guess hopefully he's doing well. And then one of my fun stats that I wanted to do, I did this from since 2014. How many like responses do we get during the week? And most of our responses end up happening on Saturdays when most people are out, which I thought was really interesting. And not a lot of them happen on Thursdays, but just kind of a fun. I don't know why. I got to take the day off on Thursday, I guess. But that's kind of our breakdown of the different stats. Does anybody have any questions about that? Yeah.
David, still,
Yeah.
is it true that if someone picks up a baby seal that they think they're helping by pushing it back, will the mother reject it later? Do they sense human touch on it, or?
So it kind of depends on the scenario. They can like sense if the seal pup is in danger and they feel threatened by the human, they won't return. I don't necessarily know about smell, but getting too close to the animal, they know that like they'll flee the scene. And we had this situation happen last year. A dog got too close to a seal pup, and it was a harbor seal pup. And the mom didn't come back. We monitored the seal for a while, and the seal pup didn't, or the mom didn't come back, which ends up happening. We want the mom to come back, which is why we monitor, which is actually this case that I'm going to talk about. But it is really, yeah, I don't pick up seal pups, please. They're just resting. And usually the mom is there, wants to be there the whole time. So a lot of like birds will actually leave the nest and then come back with food. Usually these phocids actually stay with their pup for 3 to 4 weeks and don't move. The mom is actually starving herself as she's feeding her pup, and that's why they jump back into the water after those 3 weeks. So they should be with their pup usually all the time. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll get into a happy case study, I promise. I've got 3 case studies. Yeah. Do you have a question? Yeah.
Do you think it increases program by sharks fall?
That's a good question. I don't know numbers for the population, definitely larger on the Cape. That is because of the pupping down there. So they have a ton of islands out there where the seals will actually pup and raise their pups, which is why the population is booming. There's been a relationship with white sharks for centuries. I think we have white sharks up here. I don't think it will be any different. White sharks kind of pass through here because there's not much for them. So we don't normally see them too often. If there's a larger gray seal population, they're not resting along our coastline, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't worry about gray seals coming, but that's a great question. I'll get into case study unless there's any other questions. All right. So this is S'mores, the harbor seal. I'll get into why he was named S'mores. We don't normally name them, but this guy actually went to rehab, so that's why he's named S'mores. This happened on May 1st of 2024, Rockport, Massachusetts. We were assisting NOAA because this was before we expanded our territory. This seal pup you can see is fairly young, like 2 to 3 days old. You can see it has its umbilicus right there. So just like us has a belly button, and they are mammals, so they have an umbilical cord. Since it's pink and fleshy, that's how we knew that this pup was dependent on mom. It was also vocalizing, which is also an indicator that still looking out for mom. We sighted this pup. We monitored it until sundown because it got called in at like 4 o'clock that evening. For us, we don't want to pull a pup right off the beach if we, are monitoring it and we think it's still dependent on mom because mom might come back. So we monitored it for 2 days, showed back up on the 3rd day, and we made the decision to rescue this pup since the mom was obviously not coming back. This goes there. So this was our rescue on May 4th. It was a male weanling, so this pup was fairly young. You can see around its eyes. The second photo, actually, it has a hydration mask, which is something that we use to indicate if the seal pup is hydrated or not. So in this photo, he's looking a little bit sad, obviously out of the water and dry, but he should have this kind of around this little raccoon mask around his eyes when he's taken out of the water. So he was not doing very well. Obviously, still very thin, needed mom, and probably would have passed if we didn't step in. So we decided to step in, bring the animal to National Marine Life Center down at the Cape. They do a lot of rehab down there. And that was where it was named S'mores. That summer, the theming name was after ice cream flavors. So that's why he was named S'mores. I don't know why they decided S'mores, but just fit, I guess. That also, the pup is with a stuffy, which we do use with seal pups because they do like to suckle on the seal stuffy, and it's a kind of form of comfort. Obviously, there's no milk there, but we do feed them with an alternative to kind of help them gain body weight while they're in rehab. So a couple months later, usually rehab lasts 2 to 3 months. We actually were able to release the seal. That was that previous photo that you guys saw in the first couple of pages. But this is S'mores right here, looking very different than the first photo. Obviously gained some weight, ready to go back in the ocean when it's really cold. And that photo of this seal is actually Chunky Monkey, of course. And he was rescued in Rockport, Maine. So we called them the Rockport Brothers because that was Massachusetts, Rockport, Massachusetts, and he was rescued in Rockport, Maine. So they were released together. Usually they'll try to release a couple of seals together just to make the flow a little bit easier. And sometimes seals can kind of figure out from other seals that, oh, I need to go into the water. That's what needs to happen. So they'll go into the water. This is them swimming a little bit together, and then they ended up separating because they do like to kind of be on their own. And this guy, we actually resighted a week later after it was released. This never happens, but really exciting when it does. We get a little stressed because we get nervous that something bad's going to happen after we put in all that work. But this seal was just kind of in the harbor resting, and we were able to tell that it was the same seal because of spotting, but also because of their hind flipper tag. So whenever we release a seal, we give them a hind flipper tag that's plastic. And sometimes we'll do satellite tags as well. Those are expensive and sometimes stop working after a decent amount of time. So we always will do that as kind of a way to check. And actually, a couple days after that, this seal was resighted at Odier Point State Park. So it was really cool because it was a full circle moment. We were able to see the seal rescued, released, and then it ended up kind of heading back up. But it's also kind of a point that these seals are able to kind of travel far distances within a matter of weeks. They also are able to relocate where they kind of originally were. So we know that when we do release them, they're not really lost. They're able to kind of find their way. And if you want another really cool story, that kind of stand up kind of shelf over there that has the map on it, that actually is showing another seal that we used a satellite tag on, and it kind of moved up to Nova Scotia within a matter of weeks, which is pretty cool. So then moving into case study 2, this is an entangled seal, so I just wanted to give a warning. There's no blood, but it can be kind of graphic, just a heads up. It's only on the first slide. So this is salted caramel, again, rescued during the ice cream flavor season. So that's why it's salted caramel. This seal was first reported on the Isles of Shoals, actually. So if you guys have ever been to Appledore Island, they do a lot of classes out there. And one of the surveys that they were doing for birds, actually, they sighted the seal and were able to report it to us. So when we first sighted the seal, we thought that we didn't know it was fully entangled. This was kind of the first photo that we got of it. We didn't fully know that it was entangled because you can just see kind of that slight little entanglement there. We didn't know how severe it was. We didn't know if it was moving in and out of the area. So we decided to monitor it for a couple of days just to make sure that we knew what we were doing and to be able to get a boat out there. So we don't have a boat. Everything that we do on a boat is volunteer based. So we have some awesome volunteers that all have connections. And we knew also by the third day that this animal actually was entangled and anchored to the rock, which was really unfortunate for the seal, but it actually made our jobs a little bit easier because we knew that that seal would be in that one spot when we went to go rescue it. So when they did come out and rescue it, they were able to find the seal, perform a whole response. We actually rescued the seal, kept it in the crate, and we actually just transported it straight down to NMLC, National Marine Life Center. This seal, we didn't know how severe the entanglement was, so we didn't want to take off any of the entanglement until we knew that we had people there to kind of help with any sort of bleeding that might have happened. So this is at NMLC. They took off about 6.5 pounds of netting and rope around the seal's neck. Pretty extensive. We didn't know how the seal had survived this long. And we don't think she would have survived any longer because as high tide came in, she was spinning like around the rock and it was just getting tighter and tighter. So we're glad that we stepped in when we did. And this is her after 1 month and 1 day of rehab. So she's a subadult gray seal. So she's fairly large, not full grown yet, but still very large and much larger than most of the seals that we bring into rehab. So she was only actually rehabbed for about a month until her injuries recovered, and then she was no longer on antibiotics. So you can kind of see that injury right there. I have more photos if people want to see extensive, but it's pretty graphic. So she'll always have that kind of injury kind of around, or that laceration around her neck. It's always going to be a wound that she'll have kind of for the rest of her life. And you can see that there's really no injury to the front of her neck, but it was all kind of weighing down on the back of her neck as she was kind of swimming in the water. So this is her on her release day. They actually made her own crate because she was so large. So they actually ended up making her own. We brought her out, and yeah, you can see that laceration or wound on the back of her neck that is kind of always there. It's fully healed. They checked everything, and she should be doing fine. We haven't resighted her, but as I said, that's pretty common. We don't normally resight seals that we release back into the wild. So that is kind of Salty's case. And then these are some other photos of our team in action. These are some of the swab samples that we do. This was S'mores when S'mores was rescued. This was actually the UME. So that was all the seals that people were responding to during that time. But we do lots of different things, tube feeding seals, measurements of deceased seals, dolphins. So no day is really the same when you're on a hotline. And with our territory, it really is very interesting. But that's kind of our kind of recap. Small promotion for us. I mentioned seal walks. We do those November through April. They're really fun if you guys are interested in learning more about seals and seeing them in the wild. And then we also do kayaking tours as a way to fundraise for our program and also to get outside. We don't see a lot of seals a lot of the time, but sometimes you do, and they're really fun. We go out from June to September. And we go all around Odier Point State Park. So that's kind of our outreach programs. And then this is my email. I have no more business cards, but if you want to email me, feel free to take a photo of that. That's also our Facebook. So if you liked those case studies, we do case studies like that all the time, but we will update kind of more recent case studies and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of my presentation. I have another case study, as I mentioned, that kind of focuses on some of the dolphins that we responded to last spring. It does deal with a lot of euthanasia. So I wanted to just kind of leave it out there. I can talk about it. Maybe people come up here, grab some stickers, and then I can mention it. I just didn't want people to feel forced to listen to that if they did not want to. But thank you all for letting me come and present, and let me know if you have any questions. Yeah. You're fine.
The lifespan of sea.
So in captivity, it's about 35 years. Out in the wild, it's like 25. Yeah. Yeah.
Any more questions? You did a good job. And another little plug for us too, you'll see on your way out, there's a little piece of paper like this with upcoming public events and volunteer training. So feel free to grab one if you'd like. And then like Lauren said, she's got a lot of cool stuff up here. And I don't know, are you guys interested in hearing about the euthanasia case study? I'm feeling most people probably would be. Would that be okay?
Yeah, totally fine. I didn't want people to feel forced. So as long as you guys are excited about it. Yes, feel free to leave. It is, yeah, it's I mean, not every day is a cute seal pup, as I said, but these cases are really interesting from a biology standpoint, and we do learn a lot about these animals. So it is a really interesting case. For us, we actually assisted NOAA Fisheries with this case. It's based in Salem, Massachusetts, so pretty far south for us. But it is an interesting case because of how far inland it was. So I mentioned those cold surges and how that was happening. We responded to 5 separate dolphins that were all together at one point, but ended up kind of getting dispersed throughout a matter of like 4 days. So we started out with 5 lags or Atlantic white-sided dolphins. Those were the ones that I mentioned that we responded to. These 5 dolphins were swimming near the Kernwood Bridge. They were sighted swimming around there. We got a report. We got some people to get some photos of them swimming around. The next day, we ended up seeing some of the dolphins. 2 of them ended up getting stranded on this very extreme mud flat. The mud flat was too dangerous for us to go out in, which again is the safety piece of our work. So for us, those 2 dolphins ended up passing away and they ended up getting washed out with the tide. So there were 3 other dolphins left. 2 of them we sighted the day after that. These 2 dolphins were swimming very erratically, so we knew that something was of concern. 5 dolphins, though, that are lags or Atlantic white-sided dolphins, if they're swimming that close to the shore, that's usually a really bad situation already. So these 2 dolphins, fairly small, swimming very close together, like that photo of them right next to each other, just shows kind of how close they were. Swimming in circles, which usually means like a neurological or something else might be going on with the dolphins. It created a huge crowd. So you can see like this was just one side of it. Oh, you can't see my mouse. This was one side of kind of that large crowd of people. And we also dealt with a human interaction with the day before. Somebody ended up picking up the dolphin and taking a selfie with it, which was a terrible situation and something that I hope never happens again. But those 2 dolphins, we couldn't get out there because of the mud, so we couldn't prevent the situation from happening. So these dolphins ended up going out. They ended up stranding out on the mud flat. This mud flat was a little bit more secure, and we were ready for maybe the 2 to also strand. We called in IFA as well. So IFA is that stranding. They help with strandings out on the Cape. So they do a lot of dolphin work. They had this cart that they were ready to deal with. And we also brought our stretchers. So that's our team, but then also IFA's team responding to the 2 dolphins that stranded. And again, there's still that 5th dolphin that we didn't see that day. So they stranded. We ended up bringing these dolphins back into our truck, actually, which is, we call the SEAL ambulance, but for this, it was able to fit 2 dolphins in it, which we were really glad that we could because of the crowd of people. So this is us getting a heart rate. That's my boss, Ashley. And then that's me doing a vitamin E shot, which usually helps with any blood clotting and a lot of stress that the dolphins are dealing with. So we were able to get blood samples on the dolphins, and we made the decision that these 2 dolphins were not going to make it if we did a release back out into the wild. So as I said, we do a lot of releases back into the wild, and that's always our goal. But without having long-term rehabilitation, any type of, re-release, these dolphins would not have survived, and we would have just been putting them in harm's way. So we had Dr. Charlie actually from the New England Aquarium there, and he was able to perform a euthanasia, and the animal ended up passing, and we were able to use those animals as a way to understand why other animals like them have been passing. So we were able to use these as a positive reason to hopefully prevent these dolphins from passing again, but definitely not always a positive scenario, and a complex one for sure. We're really grateful that we had all of the resources that we did, including the vet, because that sometimes we're not always able to access somebody that quickly, and also have a private area for those dolphins to be able to hopefully have a nice passing. So that was kind of our other situation, and definitely one of the cases that added a lot to our otherwise kind of increasing on our lag cases, but definitely interesting for sure. That's kind of the case. That's all the photos I have. But if anybody has any questions, we found the fifth dolphin the next day. So that dolphin had passed, unfortunately, but we were able to perform a necropsy on that dolphin as well. So all just kind of understanding more about why they passed. Yeah. No, I'm doing it right there, right into the intramuscular. So, yeah. So you can see actually in these photos, the reason why we didn't release them back out was because of how thin they were and the swimming behavior that they were exhibiting. So before, if they were swimming really successfully and the tide just went out quickly, we knew that if we released them, they'd be successful. But with these dolphins, since they were swimming really erratically, they also had been spotted swimming erratically for the last couple of days, and they're incredibly thin. So you can see that line right there in that dolphin. And you can see it's kind of a depression, if you will. Those dolphins should be completely robust and smooth, almost like a torpedo. So that's almost emaciation right there with those dolphins. If we can see that, that means that the dolphin has not been eating for a while. We also saw green algae on the flukes of the dolphin. So we knew that this dolphin had not been eating or in a really shallow area for a long period of time. But great question. Do you have any other questions? It's a complex scenario, so.
Necropsy on the fifth one.
We did a necropsy on the fifth one and those two. Yeah. No, that was included in the 5 dolphins that we brought to University of Illinois. Other ones like empty bellies, that was the other additional thing that we found, but no, yeah, which is a great question. In my time, I have not seen like the ingestion of marine debris, just entanglements. Yeah. No, we didn't. Which is a great question, but I mean, so this was in March or at the end of April, so we did not see anything following them. Yeah.
Why him?
That's a great question. They do a lot of wildlife research. Yep. So they have veterinary medicine there and they base that. Yeah. But that's a great question. Yeah. You're like, there's no dolphins out there. How do they know? Any other questions? I can put my email back up if people have any more. But feel free to reach out, and yeah, thanks again. It's been fun.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions you want to know or grab a sticker.
Yeah, also feel free